Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Today on the Focus on Why podcast, I am joined by Mel Loizou. Welcome, Mel.
Hi, Amy. So glad to be here.
Oh, I am so glad to have this incredible, fun, zany, a little bit different lady who talks about when fish climb trees.
Yes, I do. That is my philosophy in life.
Well, it's great. And let's just dive straight in and explain what when fish climb trees philosophy is all about.
Okay. So 5 years ago, I set up my business, having worked in a variety of sectors for over 25 years. And I knew what I wanted to do. And it was a culmination of all my experience and where I felt I could make a difference. And it was all around change. And I wanted a name for my organisation that really inspired people. So you know what it's like. You come up with all these I came up with blue sky thinking and none of them quite worked. And I have a friend, and I'd like to say that I came up with the name, but actually he came up with the name, and he just went through all different sorts of quotes over a weekend, and he just sent me all these different ideas. And I remember waking up on the Sunday morning, turning on my laptop, and he'd sent me a few, and at the top it was fish climb trees. And it just made me smile, and I just loved it. And then when you realised he'd got his inspiration from that quote, that, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its whole life believing it's stupid. And I just thought, that's it. That's what I'm going to call it. It means nothing to anybody. People can take what they want from it. And that was really what started me on that journey, because for me, I absolutely believe in the power of people. Everybody has the ability to be truly and utterly amazing. And so for me, that's the basis of the when fish climb trees philosophy. And it's also built on the premise that if you think about when we were our most creative, when we learnt most effectively, it was when we were children and when we were having fun. And so it's that whole idea about people are amazing, and in order to learn, we should have fun. So it brings that together.
And this untapped potential that you see in people, how do you draw it out of them?
In a variety of ways. So I work predominantly with teams and organisations, but I'm also a qualified NLP, so neuro-linguistic programming coach. So I coach people one-to-one as well. So I work on all different levels, so the individual, the team, and the organisation. But I think the fundamental is that you have to work at a deep level. So when we think about change, people think that, either it tends to be, I'm good with change, or actually I'm not. And actually, when you dig underneath change, it's actually incredibly difficult and complex. And therefore you need to work with people at different levels. And there's three things that impacts that for me. Firstly, it's the understanding that no matter what we might want to do, we can't change anybody. So there was a piece of research done by Johns Hopkins University in the US, and they did some research with coronary care patients, and they found that after surgery, 90% of people made no change to their lifestyle whatsoever. So they'd look death in the face and they still chose to do nothing about it. So if you think about that and then take that into the work environment, and organizations want to change in whatever way it might be culturally, it might be in terms of financial performance, it might be in terms of customer service. Even in that environment where you are paying people to do a job, you still can't effect change by telling them what to do. So you have to work at a deep level. And the other thing then that comes into play for me is, so you've got the whole bit about that people can't change, and then it's understanding that, and Freud is brilliant with this because he talks about our mind being an iceberg. So we have our conscious mind, and which sits above the water level on the tip of an iceberg, and then the rest of it that sits below the waterline, which is our pre-conscious mind and our unconscious mind. And actually our behavior is driven by our unconscious mind. So again, that's at a deep level. So I think that it's about understanding that, and for organizations it's about opening the door to change, so that you can open the door and people can step through it. And if you bring people with you, then you will affect the change that you want. But if you tell people what to do, you can't. So they're two really important factors. And then the other one is around the leadership and management. And I think that is a big area, because I think that, I don't know why, but as human beings, I don't believe any of us get up in the morning and think, oh, I want to pee somebody off today. I want to give them a bad time. But somehow we walk through the door at work and we leave our humanity behind, and we leave all of those base skills that we use to be a wonderful parent, family member, friend at home, because we think we need to put on this professional mask almost. And so I think that's another area. So for me, there are three bits. There's understanding that you can't tell people to change. It's understanding that you need to work at a deep level, and it's looking at that leadership and management. And they're the three areas for me. And they're the three areas that I work in.
And by changing and creating a different culture within an organisation, what benefits does that have for the business or for the university or the charity or whoever you're working for?
It creates sustainable change. And I also believe, and I have experience of this, so this isn't some ideological theory, but I actually believe that you drive longer, sustainable and better profit through doing that, because you've brought everybody with you, and you create an environment where there is creativity and innovation at every level. And therefore it may take you longer to do, but actually when you hit hard times like we're seeing right at the moment, actually they're the organizations that will come through, rather than those that are so focused on shareholder profit that it's like squeeze everything out, squeeze every ounce of energy out of the people that are working for them. So there is no creativity and innovation left. That's the reason. So that's the reason why I think people choose to work for me, and because it's slightly different. And I think that people do really want to have fun. You know, we are at our best when we are having fun, and it's when we learn and when our creativity comes to the fore. So I think that's another reason why people choose to work with me.
And when people are opening that door into the office and they suddenly become this monster that you described, in terms of they sort of have this persona of needing to be professional and not show their vulnerabilities, why is that?
Oh, great question. I think there are two factors at play. There's what is expected in a lot of organizations, and then there are our own values and beliefs and fears. And actually, for me, when I I'm designing leadership development programs and management programs, it's all about actually understanding you as an individual. Because just like you can't tell somebody what to do, the only thing you can impact is your own behavior, your thoughts, your feelings. So I think that people do that often from a fear point of view. It's their own fears, but that translates into unacceptable behavior to other people. And you see it play out time and time again. And it's just like the manager that won't delegate because they don't believe anybody could do something as well as them. That comes from a fear. That comes from an ultimate fear. And so, and I think what we do in the work environment is we exacerbate that, and they become our measures for success. So we measure people on their financial performance and their outputs rather than the process. That we don't reward people for the process that they go through. So the fact that they might have to come up with 10 naff ideas to come up with the one that is absolutely brilliant. And so if you're just rewarding that output, people will think in a very, in sort of a funnel way, that you know, they've got tunnel vision because that's what the organization expects.
So when you're working with the organizations that come to you for help, what is it they're asking, or what do they specifically recognize? And then actually it might not even be what it is that you actually help them with.
I think often it is, well, you know, a team isn't doing what I want it to do. They don't take responsibility. They don't come up with creativity and innovation. They just do what we tell them to do. And it's at that point, really, I'd love to hold a mirror up to them and say, have a look in the mirror and see where the issue is. But obviously I don't do that. But that is often where it is. It's about a lack of performance, or, well, we want people to engage in a change project, but actually we spoke to them 3 years ago. It's taken longer than we thought, and we haven't involved them since. Well, if you don't involve them, if you don't engage them in proper conversation, then how do you expect them to be engaged and want to get involved? So I think that they're the reasons that people often engage me, but what they think are the solutions aren't the solutions, and so often it's about starting to create that genuine engagement. Because people will say, oh, well, we've got a change project, and yes, we've communicated with everybody, but actually what it's been a 1 hour meeting where really all they've done is taken the key pain points, and anybody that's got anything more fundamental than that, it sort of goes on a list that, oh, well, we'll deal with that at another time, and it never really gets dealt with. So is that really engaging? And is it asking them for the solutions? You know, they're the ones working with the issues. Well, what do you think it is? How could we make this better? What would you do? And they're often not asked even those simple questions.
And it's often the simple questions that get the best answers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why is it important for you to have this business of helping companies, organizations create a culture, or create a change in culture?
I suppose because I worked for over 25 years for other organizations, and I saw so many people just existing. You know, they came to work because they had to earn a salary. They didn't enjoy it. They didn't bounce out of bed in the morning, and they just did what they had to do. And that's a really sad way to live your life, considering that we spend most of our life at work. Surely we want to create an environment where people enjoy themselves, like coming to work, and consequently the organisation benefits from from creating that environment. So I think that was my key driver. It didn't become as clear until I left, and I knew why I'd left, because I've always wanted to work for myself, and I got into that whole idea of being paid a salary, and it's very safe and it's very hard to get off that once you're on it. But if I look back over my career and I look at some of the mistakes I made, I mean, as a manager in my early career, I had some fundamental skills. So I was always really good at bringing people with me and communicating. But and I still have it now, I don't like confrontation. And to me, when I was working with people that were brilliant at what they did, fantastic. It was wonderful. But have people that needed some help and guidance in terms of developing themselves and succeeding in their career, I found that really difficult performance chats. And I made some horrendous errors and was really quite awful. And so I did address that through the personal development that I did, but there were so many people around me that didn't, and so many people in really senior positions that really didn't behave as you would want them to. And it was just awful. And I realized, before I chose to step off that bandwagon, I realized that I was fighting a losing battle. So I could effect change for my team, but that didn't mean that the wider organisation necessarily understood what I was doing. And therefore, by stepping off that bandwagon, I was able to help other people do it and affect more change, and in a greater place. So not just in one organisation, but in lots of different organisations. And that really, for me, is the important thing. I want to see organisations thriving because they have people within them that are thriving and really enjoy what they do. Because for some people, working for themselves, they would never want to do it. And that's absolutely fine. It shouldn't be that you have to work for yourself in order to really enjoy what you do. So for me, that's why I do what I do.
Was it an easy transition for you going from working for companies to then setting up your own business?
No, absolutely not. It was 2015 was one of the hardest years of my life, I would say. One, because I was so naive about what it took to set up a business. And if I was to give anybody any advice, I would say, before you take that step, at least have something that you can do. So whether you've got a small contract or you're going to work part-time or whatever it might be that you do, because I walked away and I had nothing, and I was really naive about how long it takes to create a sustainable business. Alongside that, my marriage broke down in 2015 as well, and I had 2 young daughters. So it was really tough. It was really tough. And so I was dealing with the personal transformation journey, and also then this journey of creating my own business. And I would say it probably took 2.5 years before I could legitimately say, yes, I have my own business, because it was sustainable. It wasn't scrabbling around. But I wouldn't change it for the world. And I've spent 5 years building it up. The quarter before Christmas was my busiest quarter ever, and then coronavirus hits, and you think, oh my gosh! But in spite of all of that, there's never been in my mind a thought that, oh, I should go back. I should go into a safe environment. For me, that's no longer an option. I love what I do, and I do believe I'm helping people, and I do believe that I have so much more to give and so much more change to effect that will benefit other people, that I would never go back. But it has been a tough journey. I've learned so much about myself and who I am, what's important to me. And through a lot of the work that I do, I really encourage my clients to think about what their values are, because values for me is key to that transformation and that change, because our values and beliefs sit in that part of our iceberg, if you like. They sit in our unconscious mind, and they are what drives us. So if an organization really understands its values, then it can find a way to link those values to the people that work there. They don't have to be exactly the same. You just have to find those threads, that common ground, and then that's a way to effect change. And you know, I've learned so much about myself and what's important to me and what I want to do and what I want to be known for.
And how easy is it for a company or an organisation to establish the values that they're operating from?
So in my book last year, I wrote my first book last year, When Fish Climb Trees, and there is a chapter in there, and I go on a bit of a rant about organisational values, because I get so frustrated by organisations saying these are our values, you know, integrity, customer service, whatever it might be, one word that you know that have probably been devised in a 2-hour session with the board sat in a room going, right, what are our values? It takes so much more than that. And I have worked with organisations just looking at their values, and it's about, yes, it is absolutely speaking to the board, but it's about speaking to the people in the organisation. It's about speaking to their customers. And through that, you get a sense of what is important. And last year I worked for it was a city company, and they were wanting to rebrand, and they work in the pension trustee market. And it came through a contact of mine, and I thought, oh my God, this is really, I really wasn't expecting it. And I thought, oh, I'm not sure this is the right fit for me. I do fun, and, you know, they're very serious. They look after pots and pots of money. But actually, when you got underneath the skin of this organisation, they were incredible. And actually what set them apart was their sense of fun, the fact that they really cared about their people, and that it was the relationships that they built. And we established all of this internally. And then I went to speak to their customers, and they were saying, well, you know, this is what we feel, but our customers need us to be professional, and they need us to be, you know, we're dealing with really serious issues here. We can't be seen as fun or, you know, a bit informal. And yet when I went and tested it with their customers, that was the exact reason that their customers chose to work with them, because they were different. They did have a personality. They were fun. They did care about the relationship. So, you know, there was a beautiful organisation, and that organisation really made me think about, again, that I have these values, but I had put my thoughts onto what this organisation would be like, and they turned out to be completely different. So, and I loved working with them. They were just great. And everybody in that organisation really wanted to be there. And in all the work that I did, you know how sometimes you'll go into a business and you know, you'll be stood at the front, or you'll be facilitating something, and people won't think that you're listening, and you'll hear all that little chit chat and the moans. Not at one point, and I think I worked with them on that project for about 3 months, did I hear one negative word said about anybody. And you just thought, that's the culture, that's your values. And, you know, some of the comments that came out, and that for me was what their values were about. And and I'm sure if you'd given them the opportunity, they could have sat in a room and they would have given you those professional words that they thought other people wanted to hear, whereas actually what we did was we got down and underneath that. And that really gave them sort of heart that they were going in the right direction. They thought they were, but they thought their customers might want something different, but actually they realised that they didn't.
And why do you think there is often a disconnect between the brands, the culture and the company and the people that are working there?
Great question. I think it's because people do what what they think other people want of them. So we have this idea that we need to be professional at work, and we have a personal side to us and a professional side to us. We don't. There's just Amy and there's just Mel. And sometimes we'll be at work and sometimes we'll be at home and sometimes we'll be doing both. And I think that that's what organisations do. They believe they need to be one way, and yet they're working in disconnect with what their real values are and what the values are of their people. And therefore, that's why there is the disconnect. And they don't spend the time, because it does take time to really understand what's important to their people, what's important to their customers, and what they want to be known for, and really known for in a deep way. This is not something you can do in a couple of hours, and it does involve everybody in the organisation if you really want to understand it.
And at what point did you discover this love for finding people's true genius?
Oh gosh, so as I said, I was a bit of a nightmare manager in my early days, and I flew by the seat of my pants. I had no development training. I did a degree, and it was a management degree, and they taught you all the theory, but they didn't tell you anything about what it was actually like. So I did the best that I could, and I did achieve results, and then I went off and I had my first daughter, Ellie. Went back to work after 6 months. And the university I was at, we had a new training manager and we got on really well. We did a couple of projects together. And then one day he saw me and he said, "Do you know what, Mel?" He said, "I really think you would benefit from some coaching." And it was when coaching had sort of first come into the development arena. And I was like, "Coaching? I have no clue what you're talking about, but I'll go for it." And so he set me up with a coach. And I remember having the first session, and it's really interesting because she's probably somebody I would never sort of normally sit in a room with. She was beautifully made up, very professional. She sat opposite me, which is not something I would ever choose to do when I'm in a coaching situation with somebody. But she must have been so good at what she did, because I came out of the first 2-hour session and I was literally bounding along, and Tim came and saw me and said, "How did you get on?" I said, "It was brilliant. It was like the best counselling session ever. I'd spent 2 hours just there." But I'd had a couple of light bulb moments, and it was fascinating, and that set me on the journey. And interestingly, as part of the work that she did some 360-degree feedback. And when she gave it back to me, she said, "Do you know what? I've never had such positive feedback about anybody." There were still areas for development. And that blew me away, because I really didn't have in my head, and I talk about my fishnets in my book, but my fishnets, the beliefs I had about myself weren't that at all. So it was a real moment of, oh, okay. Oh, there were areas to develop which I absolutely latched onto, and it was like, okay, right, how can we work on these? And so that was my first introduction to coaching. And then Tim went off and he did the basic neuro-linguistic programming course, and he said to me, "Mel, I think you should do this." I did it. It changed my life, and I went through a transformation. Prior to that, I'd always been somebody that I would make those snap decisions. I'd see you, I'd make a decision about whether I liked you. If I didn't like you, or I didn't feel that we were the same, I couldn't communicate with you. I found it very difficult. After 10 days of being immersed in neuro-linguistic programming, I came out, and it started that journey of recognizing that we're all different. My reaction to you is not about you, it's about me. And what does that say about me? And now I just have a curiosity about everyone. And if there is a reaction there, then I'm curious as to what is driving that, rather than associating it with, well, that means that they don't like me and therefore I can't work with them. So I did my basic, and then I did my master NLP, and through doing that, my career went up tenfold. I mean, I went to a university as sales and marketing manager, and within 9 months I'd been made an assistant director, and then 3 years later I became director of campus services. So I had 600 people working for me, 21 different business functions, £30 million budget. It was incredible, and I would say all of that success came from the fact that I started to develop myself and look at what I needed to do, and it was through changing me that I was then able to help other people affect change. So that was what really kicked me off, and now I'm just fascinated. I'm fascinated by people and why we do what we do, and I want everybody to sort of enjoy the journey that I've been on. And I think often, again, in business, there's executive programs for the senior leadership team, but we don't look at sort of everybody in the organization, and we don't look at that middle and new management levels. And I think that that's where the gold dust really happens, because often in an organization, my experience is that you'll go in and there'll be somebody at the top that knows what they want to do, they know what they want to achieve, and will design a program, and then the people on the front line will completely get what it's about. But the people that get stuck are the middle and new managers. So, they're getting this change of direction, they haven't figured out who they are, and then they're trying to affect that change. And so for me, a lot of the work that I do, I want to make it accessible to everybody, because there's this thought that, leadership books should be tough and challenging to read. And actually, why does that have to be the case? And why do you need to be a senior executive to have access to that thinking and that development? Because if we believe that everyone has the ability to change, then everyone should have access to it.
I totally agree. And it sounds by the sounds of things, universities float your boat particularly. Why is that?
I think my dad is an academic, and he is one of my biggest inspirations. He's a professor of computer science. He could have gone out and earned a fortune, but he didn't. He chose to stay in one university for the whole of his career. But I've never met anyone who's so happy, so content. And he says he spent his whole life doing his hobby. I mean, how many of us would like to do that? So I fell into universities. I did a degree in hospitality management. I went out and worked in the sector for a couple of years, and I had a really bad experience there. It was awful. I got made redundant, had a general manager from, some people may remember Trust House 40. They were a big hotel brand. He was awful. He treated me really badly. And I came out of that and thought, I don't want to work in the hospitality industry anymore. And then these jobs came up in universities working on the commercial side, so sort of selling the facilities they had when students weren't there for conferences and events. And I thought, well, my dad's always been happy in universities. Why don't I try that? And I did. And then 20 years later, it's like, oh, okay, right, now I need to go do something else. But it was fantastic. And I think there's a part of me that is an academic. I love learning. I love development. But I don't want to do research. I need to be out there doing it. And I think that's the fundamental difference. And we did have a laugh when I was writing my book. My dad kept saying to me, "So have you got your references in there?" I was like, "There are no references, Dad. There is no. It's not an academic book that you wrote. This is a business book." It's like, oh, okay. So where are the references? It's like there are no references. So yeah, and it's just it. Do you know what? I love that sector particularly because they are training the people of tomorrow. They're training our future. And they're big and complex organizations, and there's a disconnect sometimes between the research that academics want to do, and then now universities are a business, and how do you affect that change? And they're great at sort of creating the people of tomorrow, but they don't always look at the people that are within the organization. And I mean the people that aren't academics. And there are a lot of people within universities that go to supporting how a university runs. So yeah, they're big and complex, and I speak their language and I love them.
So what would you say your mission is, Mel? What are you looking to achieve?
I would like more and more people to adopt the when fish climb trees philosophy. So my book is entitled When Fish Climb Trees, Can Do Leadership in a World of Can't. And I think that is the absolute premise, taking people from can't to can will then take teams from can't to can, which will then take organizations from can't to can. And when we start to look at that, what can you achieve? What can you do? I mean, what better philosophy is that? And I think that if you look at research, the biggest regret people have when they're at the end of their lives is not that they wish they'd worked more or that they'd earned more money. It was that they wish they'd lived the life that they could live. And for me, that is so true. And by moving from can't to can, you're on that ladder to creating the life that you want, whether that be at work or at home.
And I think you mentioned the impact NLP has had on your life. And I think NLP is incredible. I haven't done the formal training, but I have read a lot of books around it, and I've adopted a lot of it into my everyday life and also the coaching I do. But it's very much all about language and perception and the reality that you have, your filters. It's incredible. And it seems like a basic tool that everybody should have.
Mm. It is phenomenal. And it was interesting when I was doing my training, there were a lot of learning and development people on it. In fact, I was the only one that wasn't from a learning and development background. I was there as a manager who wanted to be a better manager. And so for me, I very much took the language and the fact that, well, I'll try and do that. Well, if you say you'll try and do that, you're giving yourself an excuse not to do it. Well, I could never do that. Well, never really? Are you sure about that? And all those suppositions that we have, it's so powerful. And then nowadays, when I am coaching one-to-one, I use a lot of those NLP techniques because they're pattern interrupts, and that's what we need to do. We need to interrupt our patterns of behavior. We need to interrupt our patterns of thinking, because then we can do something differently. And that means we can go from being can't people to being can people.
I think a lot of people don't even realize the language they use on an everyday basis and how much that does affect their ability to can do things,
Yeah.
to be able to do things. It is really quite striking when you start to notice what you say, and
Yes.
you're very, very aware of that. And I remember even my journals that I keep, the difference in the language became quite clear for me after reading about it, and it was very pivotal in the success that then has come since.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I look at my daughters, I have one who wants to be an accountant and one who wants to be an actress, so completely different, but it frightens me sometimes, especially my younger daughter is well, she's 14 now, but she wants to be an actress, and just hearing some of the language that she uses about herself, and it shocks me, because I think, where has that come from? But already she's giving herself these negative messages, and it's no. So every time she does it, it's like, well, I can't do this. Well, shall we see whether maybe you can do this? And so it is really interesting, and we get into that way very young. So when we're in the work environment, those trains of thoughts are embedded, and that's why the work that I love doing, that I really want to do, is working at a deep level within organisations to change that. But you are looking at years of what people bring with them.
And I think that's that legacy, that sort of long-term thought that will drive the success of an organisation, instead of just thinking about the short-term return for the shareholders.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And in the end, that will give you a sustainable organisation that will see through difficulties like we're seeing at the moment.
Absolutely. Well, Mel Loizou, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today. I'm so happy that you can share your when fish climb trees philosophy with everybody. It is a refreshing change to the way that leadership is sort of thought about and can be changed. You know, it's fantastic that you've written this bright pink fish filled book that people should definitely have a flick through, and then actually realize that they need to read it from cover to cover, because it's got so much content in there and it's fun.
Thank you. I really, to be able to talk about what I love to do and what I believe is wonderful. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. And how could people get in contact with you, Mel?
So I'm on all the usual social media channels: LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I have a website, Fish Climb Trees, www.fishclimbtrees.co.uk. My book is available on all good online retailers, so Amazon, or if you really want to, you can pick up the phone as well. Always happy to have a chat.
And there's something else that you do as well, the PSA. Would you like to mention that?
Oh, yes. So, oh, gosh, we didn't even get a chance to talk about that in my speaking journey, which is not what you may have thought. But yes, so currently I am co-president of the Southeast region of the Professional Speaking Association with the wonderful Jez Ray, who I believe you've also spoken to as well.
I have. He's going to be on too.
Fab. So the Professional Speaking Association, an absolutely brilliant organisation for anyone that wants to or does speak professionally. And that doesn't necessarily mean on a big stage with 500 people in the room. It could be trainers that are training 10 people, or salespeople that just want to pitch better, whatever it may be. It's a wonderful organisation. There are regions all over the country. We meet down in Kent, but they're all over the place. And of all the organisations I joined when I set my business up 5 years ago, there are only two that I'm still members of, and one is the Professional Speaking Association. So I would highly recommend it for anyone that wants to develop their speaking and just spend some time with a range of, Amy, you and I would never have met if it wasn't for the Professional Speaking Association, from a world of different organisations where you can get so much inspiration and knowledge and really develop yourself. So,
well,
yeah.
I totally endorse that, and it was such an eye opener to me. It was a breath of fresh air walking into the room and speaking to people. I knew one face, that was Rosemary. I knew Rosemary from before because she'd been coming to my network events that I've been hosting, so that was lovely, a surprise. And then it was filled. I mean, we were just at the beginning of thinking about going into lockdown, so that it was all elbow nudging at the time. It was that social distancing, and then obviously we've had since then we've had them online. But I highly recommend looking to go and see your local PSA meeting. In fact, it was recommended in Sam Rathling's book, LinkedIn Bound. And she said, go to your PSA. And that's how I came to the one, because I was reading her book and I literally bought my ticket there and then. And so taking action on both accounts always. And then it was a case of went there, didn't know what to expect, and didn't quite follow the rules because I didn't know. And you have to give feedback on someone's talk, and then you go through that with them, and you give them the even better ifs, and then you hand it in. And I'd written all these notes for my own personal reference of like how I could take things. So I was like reluctantly handing in these notes that I'd written, but it's fine. I took photos, so I've got them there. But it was such a great opportunity to meet people from different industries, to have that sort of cross fertilization of of connections and insights and the way people do things in different ways. I thought that was really, really interesting for me.
Yeah, it is. It's a brilliant organisation, and it's why I'm still there 5 years after I joined, and that now I'm volunteering to be a regional president, because it with these organisations, it's like anything in life. If you want something out of it, you have to give out, and the PSA is one of them. So yes, and I wouldn't be sat here talking to you right now if we hadn't.
Now our paths would not have crossed. So
Exactly.
So what I would love for you to do is if we just leave the audience with a final sort of message, something important to you.
I would say that actually, if you sat there and listened to this podcast, or even not necessarily listen to this podcast, but there is something within your life that isn't working for you, then I would urge you to be brave and to look at really understand why that is, and to make the change, because it sounds twee, but we only have one life, and you don't want to be one of those people that gets to the end of your life and wishes that you'd done things differently. So it's not easy. It's a continual journey. You will have ups and downs, but don't be a person with regrets.
Thank you for listening to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson, and if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star iTunes review. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook, and become a member of the inspiring, uplifting and positive Focus on Why Facebook group. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.